Your mind is powerful, but if you do not learn how to guide it, the same mind that can build your future can also become the reason you remain trapped in the same patterns. Every day, thoughts appear. Some tell you to begin. Others tell you to wait. Some tell you that you are capable. Others remind you of every failure you have ever experienced. And the question is not whether these thoughts will come. They will. The real question is, who decides what happens next? Will you follow every emotion? Will you obey every impulse? Will you allow temporary discomfort to determine your permanent decisions? Or will you learn to pause, observe, and choose? This is where self-discipline begins. Self-discipline is not about becoming harsh with yourself. It is not about forcing yourself to become someone you are not. It is about becoming strong enough to keep your direction when your feelings try to pull you somewhere else, because motivation changes, emotion changes, circumstances change. But the person who has trained the mind does not need perfect conditions to continue. When you wake up and do what needs to be done, even when you do not feel like doing it, you are training the mind. When you remain silent, instead of reacting immediately, you are training the mind. When you choose patience instead of instant gratification, you are training the mind. And every small decision becomes a message to yourself. I am in control, not because you control everything around you. You don't. You cannot control what people say. You cannot control how others behave. You cannot control every challenge that enters your life. But you can train yourself not to become a prisoner of your reactions. That is a different kind of strength. The strongest person is not always the loudest. Sometimes strength is simply the ability to sit with discomfort without escaping, to experience anger without becoming anger, to experience fear without allowing fear to make every decision, to experience doubt without surrendering your direction. Your mind will always offer you an easier path, but the easier path is not always the path that leads to growth. So begin observing yourself. Notice the moment when you want to quit. Notice the moment when you want to react. Notice the moment when you reach for distraction, because silence makes you uncomfortable. Do not judge yourself. Simply observe. Because the moment you can observe your thoughts without automatically obeying them, something changes. You create space between the thought and the action. And inside that space is your freedom. Master that space. Train that mind. Choose your actions consciously. Because if you do not decide how your mind should serve you, your impulses will decide for you. And slow, without even realizing it, you will no longer be living by choice. You will be living by reaction. So today, do not try to control the entire world. Start with yourself. Frister your attention. Frister your reactions. Frister your habits. Frister the small decisions that nobody else sees. Because when you master the mind before it controls you, self-discipline stops feeling like a restriction. It becomes freedom. Your mind becomes your master. When you stop observing your thoughts, every thought that enters your mind carries a certain direction. Some thoughts encourage you to move forward. Some make you question yourself. Some create fear before anything has even happened. Others remind you of the past and convince you that because something happened before, it must happen again. The mind produces all of this continuously. But a thought is not a command. A thought is simply an event taking place within you. The problem begins when you stop observing and start obeying. You feel anger and immediately you speak. You feel fear and immediately you withdraw. You feel tired and immediately you quit. You feel the desire for distraction and immediately you reach for your phone. You experience discomfort, and immediately you search for something that will make it disappear. Slowly, you stop choosing your actions. Your impulses begin choosing them for you. This is how the mind becomes the master, not in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of small decisions repeated every day. The mind learns from what you repeatedly do. If every uncomfortable feeling is followed by escape, your mind learns that discomfort must be avoided. If every difficult task is followed by procrastination, your mind learns that difficulty is a reason to stop. If every emotional trigger is followed by reaction, your mind learns that emotion deserves immediate action. And eventually, these patterns begin to feel automatic. You may say, "This is just who I am." But perhaps it is not who you are. Perhaps it is simply what you have practiced. This distinction is important because what has been practiced can also be retrained. The first step is awareness. Before you can change the mind, you must become capable of watching it. Notice what happens inside you when something does not go according to your expectations. Notice the first thought that appears when someone criticizes you. Notice what you tell yourself when you fail. Notice the excuses that appear when you know something needs to be done. Do not immediately fight these thoughts. Do not become angry with yourself for having them. Simply observe. There is great strength in learning to watch without immediately reacting. Imagine someone says something that normally triggers you. Your first impulse may be to defend yourself. You may feel your body becoming tense. You may already be preparing your response before the other person has finished speaking. But instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe, you observe the anger. You notice the thought saying, "I need to answer this right now." And then you wait. In that moment, you have created distance between the thought and the action. That distance is where self-discipline begins. You are not denying your emotion. You are not pretending that you are unaffected. You are simply refusing to allow an emotion to automatically become an action. This applies to every area of life. When you want to procrastinate, observe the desire. When you want to give up, observe the thought. When you want immediate pleasure instead of long-term progress, observe the impulse. You do not need to destroy the thought. You only need to decide whether it deserves your obedience. This is one of the deepest forms of self-mastery. A disciplined person is not someone who never experiences weakness, fear, anger, laziness, or doubt. A disciplined person is someone who can experience these things without allowing them to determine every decision. Your mind will continue producing thoughts. That is its nature. You cannot always choose what appears in your mind, but you can become more conscious of what you accept, what you reinforce, and what you act upon. The more you observe yourself, the more clearly you begin to see your patterns. And once you can see the pattern, you can interrupt it. That is where real change begins. Not when you become a completely different person overnight, but when you catch yourself in the small moments where you normally react automatically and choose differently. One pause, one breath, one conscious decision, then another. Over time, these small moments become habits. Your habits shape your character. Your character shapes your life. So do not be afraid of your thoughts. Learn to observe them. Do not believe every thought simply because it appeared inside your mind. Do not obey every impulse simply because it feels strong. Stand back. Watch. Choose. Because the moment you realize that you can observe your thoughts without becoming controlled by them, you begin taking back the authority you unknowingly gave away. Self-discipline means choosing what matters over what feels easy. This sounds simple, But in reality, it is one of the most difficult lessons a person can learn, because the mind naturally searches for comfort. It wants the easier path, the faster reward, the familiar routine, and the immediate pleasure. It tells you to rest when you should act, to speak when you should remain silent, to quit when you should continue, and to choose what feels good now, instead of what will make you stronger later. But growth rarely lives inside what is easy. Every day you are faced with small choices. You can stay in bed for another hour, or you can get up and begin your work. You can spend another hour consuming distractions, or you can invest that hour in learning something useful. You can react to criticism, or you can pause and ask yourself whether there is something worth understanding. You can choose instant pleasure, or you can choose something that moves you closer to the person you want to become. None of these decisions may seem important in the moment, but they are. Your life is not shaped only by the major decisions you make once in a while. It is shaped by the small decisions you repeat every day. This is why discipline is so powerful. Discipline teaches you to stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What needs to be done?" There will be mornings when you do not feel motivated. There will be days when your energy is low. There will be moments when you doubt yourself. If your actions depend entirely on how you feel, your progress will always be unstable. When your emotions are strong, you move forward. When your emotions change, you stop. You become dependent on a feeling that was never designed to remain constant. Discipline gives you another foundation. It says, "I may not feel like doing this, but I have decided that it matters." That decision changes everything. You begin to understand that discomfort is not always a warning to stop. Sometimes discomfort is simply evidence that you are doing something unfamiliar. The first days of building a habit may feel difficult. The first steps toward a meaningful goal may feel uncertain. The process of becoming stronger may challenge parts of you that have become comfortable with staying the same. But you do not need to eliminate discomfort. You need to become capable of carrying it. This is where many people misunderstand self-discipline. They think discipline means forcing yourself through life without rest, emotion, or enjoyment. It does not. True discipline is balance. It means knowing when to work and when to rest, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, knowing when to push forward and when to step back. It means being able to delay something you want, because something more important requires your attention. When you practice this consistently, you begin developing trust in yourself. You say you will wake up early, and you do. You say you will complete the task, and you finish it. You say you will stop reacting to every provocation, and you pause. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. And this is something many people overlook. Confidence is not only created by achievements. It is also created by keeping commitments to yourself. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you will change but continue returning to the same habits, you weaken your trust in your own words. But when your actions begin matching your intentions, something inside you becomes stronger. You no longer need constant external motivation. You begin moving because you have decided to move. This is the quiet power of discipline. Nobody needs to see it. Nobody needs to applaud it. You simply wake up and do what matters. You choose the long-term reward over the temporary comfort. You choose progress over excuses. You choose patience over impulse. You choose your future over the convenience of the present moment. And slowly, the person who once needed motivation begins to become the person who can rely on commitment. That is when discipline stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a form of self-respect. Because every time you choose what truly matters over what merely feels easy, you are telling yourself that your future is worth protecting, your goals are worth pursuing, and the person you are becoming is more important than the temporary comfort you could have chosen today. You cannot control every thought, but you can control which thoughts you follow. The mind is constantly moving. Thoughts appear without asking permission. Memories return, fears arise, doubts speak, desires become stronger. Sometimes a thought appears that you do not want, and sometimes an idea arrives that seems to come from nowhere. This is part of being human. The goal is not to create a mind that never produces negative or distracting thoughts. The goal is to become conscious enough to decide which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones should simply pass. A thought becomes powerful when you repeatedly give it your attention. Imagine a small worry entering your mind. At first, it may be nothing more than a simple thought. But then you begin thinking about it again. You create another scenario, then another. You imagine what could go wrong. You remember something that happened years ago. You connect unrelated events. Soon, the original thought has become a complete story. And now you are no longer simply having a thought. You are living inside it. This is why awareness matters. You may not be able to stop the first thought, but you can interrupt the second, third, and fourth thought that you choose to build around it. Someone may criticize you. The thought may come, they do not respect me. You cannot always prevent that thought from appearing, but you can ask yourself, is this completely true? Perhaps they were simply expressing an opinion. Perhaps there is something useful in what they said. Perhaps their words reflect their own frustration rather than your value. The pause gives you choices. Without the pause, the mind reacts. With the pause, the mind observes. This is the difference between being controlled by your thoughts and learning to guide them. The same principle applies to fear. Fear may tell you, you are not ready, but instead of immediately accepting it, you can ask, what evidence supports this thought? Fear may tell you, you will fail. You can respond internally, maybe I will make mistakes, but I can learn from them. The goal is not to replace every negative thought with unrealistic positivity. That is not self-mastery. Self-mastery means seeing clearly. Sometimes the thought is useful, sometimes it is exaggerated, sometimes it is based on the past, sometimes it is simply an emotional reaction. Your responsibility is to examine it before allowing it to guide your behavior. This requires practice because the mind prefers automatic patterns. If you have spent years believing every fearful thought, questioning those thoughts may feel uncomfortable. If you have spent years reacting whenever you feel angry, remaining silent may initially feel impossible. If you have always followed the easiest impulse, choosing discipline may feel unnatural. But unnatural does not mean wrong. It may simply mean unfamiliar. Every time you pause before acting, you strengthen your ability to choose. Every time you question an automatic belief, you create mental flexibility. Every time you refuse to feed an unnecessary worry, you protect your attention. And attention is one of your most valuable resources. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. If you constantly focus on what others think about you, your energy moves toward approval. If you constantly focus on what went wrong yesterday, your energy moves toward the past. If you constantly imagine everything that could go wrong tomorrow, your energy moves toward fear. But when you bring your attention back to what you can actually influence, your energy becomes useful again. You begin asking different questions. What can I do now? What is within my control? What action will move me forward? What kind of person do I want to be in this situation? These questions return responsibility to you. You stop waiting for the mind to become perfectly calm before taking action. You learn to act even when thoughts are noisy. This is important because inner strength does not mean having a completely silent mind. Sometimes strength is continuing while the mind is uncertain. Sometimes strength is remaining calm while the mind is creating stories. Sometimes strength is hearing the voice of doubt and choosing not to follow it. Your thoughts are information, not instructions. Your emotions are experiences, not commands. Your impulses are signals, not obligations. You can acknowledge them without surrendering your direction. And with practice, you begin to notice something powerful. You realize that you are not every thought that passes through your mind. You are the one who can observe those thoughts. And when you learn to observe before you follow, you begin to reclaim the ability to choose your response, your attention, and ultimately the direction of your life. Consistency builds a mind that remains steady under pressure. It is easy to feel strong when everything is going well. When life is comfortable, people are supporting you, your plans are working, and there are no major obstacles in front of you. Remaining calm does not require much effort, but the real test of the mind appears when circumstances change. Pressure arrives, plans fail, people disappoint you, expectations are not met. Suddenly, the calmness you believed you had is challenged. This is why consistency matters. A strong mind is not built in one extraordinary moment. It is built through ordinary moments, repeated again and again. Every time you choose discipline when nobody is watching, you strengthen yourself. Every time you remain patient instead of reacting, you train yourself. Every time you complete what you promised yourself you would complete, you build trust within yourself. Small actions become mental conditioning. Think about physical strength. You do not become strong because you lift a heavy weight once. Strength develops because you train repeatedly. You place stress on the body, recover, return, and gradually become capable of handling more. The same principle applies to the mind. You train your patience through situations that test your patience. You train your focus by returning your attention when it wanders. You train your discipline by doing what needs to be done, even when you do not feel like doing it. You train emotional control by creating a pause between what happens and how you respond. Over time, these repeated actions create stability. Then pressure arrives, and you discover that you are not reacting the way you once did. This does not mean pressure disappears. It means you have changed your relationship with pressure. Instead of immediately asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of immediately blaming someone, you pause. Instead of making a decision from anger, you wait until your mind becomes clearer. Instead of abandoning your goal because progress becomes difficult, you return to the next small step. This is mental strength in practice. The important thing is not perfection. You will still have difficult days. You will still lose patience sometimes. You will still become distracted. You may react in a way that you later regret. But consistency means that one mistake does not become a reason to abandon your entire path. You notice it, you learn from it, you return. That return is one of the most important parts of discipline. Many people believe they fail because they made a mistake. Often, they fail because after making the mistake, they decide there is no point continuing. They miss one day and stop the habit. They lose their temper once and decide they cannot change. They experience failure and begin identifying themselves with failure. But one moment does not define your character. What you repeatedly return to does. If you fall, return. If you lose focus, return. If you become emotional, return. If you become distracted, return. Every return is another repetition of discipline. And eventually, discipline becomes less dependent on your mood. You do not need to feel powerful before acting with strength. You act with strength, and through repeated action, you become stronger. This is why consistency is more valuable than intensity. A person who works extremely hard for 3 days and then disappears for 3 weeks has created less transformation than the person who takes a small step every day. The mind responds to repetition. What you repeatedly think about becomes familiar. What you repeatedly practice becomes easier. What you repeatedly tolerate becomes normal. And what you repeatedly choose begins to shape your identity. So choose carefully. Practice calmness before you desperately need it. Practice patience before you are tested. Practice discipline before the difficult moment arrives. Because when pressure eventually comes, you will not suddenly become disciplined. You will fall back on what you have practiced. If you have practiced reaction, you will react. If you have practiced avoidance, you will avoid. But if you have practiced awareness, patience, discipline, and conscious choice, those qualities become available when you need them most. A steady mind is not created by waiting for life to become peaceful. It is created by training yourself to remain grounded while life is changing around you. And when you continue this practice, pressure no longer has the same power over you because you have slowly built something stronger than the pressure itself. The ability to remain present, deliberate, and committed to your path, even when everything around you is asking you to lose your balance. True freedom begins when your actions are no longer controlled by impulses. Most people think freedom means having no restrictions. They imagine freedom as doing whatever they want, whenever they want, following every desire without anyone telling them what to do. But if you examine this carefully, there is another question. What if you are controlled by what you want? What if every impulse becomes an instruction? What if you cannot say no to yourself? Then you may have freedom from other people, but you are still a prisoner of your own habits. An impulse can appear in a second. You feel the desire to check your phone, so you check it. You feel angry, so you respond immediately. You want something, so you buy it. You feel tired, so you abandon the task. You crave comfort, so you avoid the difficult conversation. None of these actions may seem significant on their own, but repeated thousands of times, they begin to shape your life. The impulse becomes familiar. The reaction becomes automatic. And eventually, you stop asking whether the action is good for you. You simply do it because the desire appeared. This is where self-discipline becomes a form of freedom. Discipline gives you the ability to pause. Between desire and action, there can be a moment of awareness. You want to speak, but you pause. You want to react, but you breathe. You want to quit, but you remember why you started. You want immediate pleasure, but you consider what it will cost you later. That pause may seem small, but it changes the relationship you have with yourself. You are no longer saying, I must do this because I feel like it. You are saying, I can feel this desire without being controlled by it. That is freedom. You do not need to destroy your desires. You need to become capable of choosing which desires deserve to become actions. There will always be impulses. The mind will always look for stimulation. The body will sometimes seek comfort. Emotions will rise and fall. But you can learn not to move automatically with every internal change. Imagine feeling anger and choosing not to speak until you are calm. The anger is still there, but it no longer controls your words. Imagine feeling lazy and still completing the important task. The laziness is present, but it does not determine your behavior. Imagine feeling afraid and still taking one small step forward. Fear exists, but it does not hold the final decision. This is not weakness. This is mastery. The person who can tell themselves no is often more free than the person who says yes to every desire. Because every uncontrolled yes creates another form of dependence. Yes to distraction, yes to procrastination, yes to unnecessary arguments, yes to unhealthy habits, yes to temporary pleasure. And eventually, the person wonders why life feels out of control. But control is rebuilt through small choices. You do not need to change everything at once. Begin with one impulse. When you feel the urge to react, wait 5 seconds. When you want to avoid something important, take the first small step. When you want to reach for distraction, ask whether you truly need it. When you feel like giving up, remind yourself that feelings are temporary, but decisions can have lasting consequences. The goal is not to become emotionless. It is not to become rigid. It is not to live without pleasure. It is to become conscious enough to choose. Because there is a difference between doing something because you want it and doing something because you cannot resist it. One is choice. The other is control. And the more you practice conscious choice, the stronger your inner freedom becomes. You begin to understand that discipline does not take freedom away. It protects it. When you control your impulses, you gain control over your time. When you control your reactions, you protect your relationships. When you control your attention, you protect your goals. When you control your habits, you protect your future. You are no longer being pulled in every direction by whatever happens inside your mind. You have a direction, and even when temptation appears, you can return to that direction. This is what it means to master yourself, not to become perfect, not to eliminate every weakness, but to become the person who can pause, observe, and choose. Because the greatest freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. The greatest freedom is the ability to choose what is right for you, even when another part of you wants something easier, faster, or more comfortable.